After just 50 minutes of messing around with settings to get the graphic settings right, the force feedback settings, my pedals, wheel and everything else working properly, we are ready to do our first ever first impressions of F1 2021. In order to do our first impressions, I have just launched into the Silverstone solo mode 5-lap sprint. I've turned all the assists off on the car, so it should be raw like a piece of chicken cooked in kitchen nightmares. You know, we should be getting a basic baseline experience of the game for me to give a valid first impressions of things. I will say I did have to have a cup of tea after setting up the bloody setting stuff up, because there's no mouse and the keyboard doesn't work in this game, which for a PC game is a bit unacceptable. I'd imagine if you were to, if you're playing on a gamepad or you're playing on console and you just plug in like a Fanatec wheel into your games console, or Thrustmaster T300, Logitech, God knows what, G293, or whatever. If you just plug that into games console, Xbox controller, I'm sure it just works out of the box. But on PC, if you've got different controllers and stuff, you do have to do a little bit of fiddling, which is a bit annoying, especially without a keyboard and mouse. Fortunately, in my case, I am using a Fanatec Podium DD, which is the Fanatec DD that also works on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. So at least the buttons on that all lined up without too much effort. Anyway, into the driving, and I will say, once you turn the enhanced understeer effect off, the force feedback and the general handling is not terrible. It's not terrible. This feels reasonably okay. Whoa! The cars are quite drivable. They don't feel totally sloppy. Things definitely feel a lot tighter in this version of the of F1 compared to previous versions of F1 that I've played from Codemasters. That said, though, obviously, me personally, I normally play the PC driving simulators, Assetto Corsa, Affialte 2, Race Room, iRacing, and what have you. And, it's hard to draw, draw a direct comparison, because obviously this is for a different market. This isn't trying to be a hardcore simulator. I always feel like the Formula 1 games are supposed to be more like a role-playing game rather than an actual driving simulator. They are in a really weird position, though, because they are quite complicated. And the handling isn't like arcade. I wouldn't even describe it as simcade. I'd sort of just describe it as unrealistic, but with a bit of depth there. But reasonably drivable. A little bit boaty. Definitely less concise. Nowhere near as concise and tight and as responsive as Assetto Corsa, or like what I would say is the benchmark for Formula cars in a simulator that you can access at home and not on an F1 team simulator. The Formula RSS cars for Assetto Corsa are literally like the best simulated Formula cars that you can have access to. They're just unbelievable force feedback, unbelievable physics, depth, response, immediacy. So compared to that, these aren't really in the same ballpark as that. But this isn't awful. Like, it's not awful. It's definitely its own. It's its own physics. What I would say is the cornering stuff. Like, as you're getting through the corners and pushing, is nice and sort of intuitive. What I have noticed straight away, though, is that braking isn't intuitive. There's not much force feedback for where the braking limit is, and then the low speed corners and when to get on the power and how much you can get on the power, that is not intuitive as well. The force feedback is definitely lacking for those moments where when you'd be really driving at the limit, and when you'd be really trying to eke out time if you're trying to actually drive a lot better. And that's where stuff like Assetto Corsa really shines. It's those very precise, tight moments when you're having to be super accurate on the pedals. But as this is largely, I would sort of describe it as a role-playing game rather than a simulator, not awful. It'll be really interesting to drive tracks like Monaco and or tracks which are a little bit less flat than Silverstone to see, because Silverstone can hide with high downforce cars. Tracks like Silverstone can really hide physics and physics issues, because when you're in a Formula car, when you're going at high speed, the downforce sticks the car so much to the road. Those sort of bits where you're actually driving on the tyres and really driving on the rawness of the tyre model, they're hidden because everything's so planted. That's the case in iRacing as well, actually. When you're going quick in iRacing, you're not sliding around too much. Sort of hides those moments when you sort of push a bit harder or you're trying to balance the car at the limit. Definitely needed to put the AI on a harder setting. I say this is all just the default setting, straight out of the box. Look at the roundabout there. The graphics and everything are really nice, I have to say. It looks like the track. I was fortunate enough, thanks to Fanatec, to watch the Silverstone race live in the club box thing with a DJ and attractive women everywhere. Hard life. So it's a shame. Your spectators aren't allowed to just jump in a Formula car and drive it in real life to do a quick comparison. You know, that should be a thing. Track looks good. The other cars look nice until we passed them. Whoa! Okay. Things got a bit leery there. Absolutely rinsing everything as Hamilton here. Hamilton's got the power push on, and it's not even raining. It'll be really interesting to race this online. So you can only really test driving simulators properly.
This is your final lap of the race.
You know, you can only really know the difference between sims and racing games once you start to get within that sort of 1.5 2 seconds of what the actual track pace is, because you have to be, to get to that level, you really do have to be driving at the limit of the simulator, and that's where you typically find the issues or the parts of the game that end up being very annoying if you're spending a lot of time on it. There's definitely not that much variation in the force feedback at low speed. So it does feel like there's sort of like a bit of a spring to the force feedback in this. It just doesn't have the tightness that you get on the simulators, but I don't know, it depends what sort of expectation you're going into when you play something like this. I think in my mind, the Formula 1 games, you really sort of have to go into it. If you're coming at it from, if you play a lot of driving sims, you sort of have to go into it with it's a kind of bizarre, somewhat simulator, not simulator, role-playing game with all the licensed content from Formula 1 and the driver names and stuff, and you know, the whole sort of my team single player stuff. So if you don't like online racing, you like racing against AI, or maybe you've got a friend that you do racing with and you want to play through a season, that's the kind of thing where I think this kind of game shines the most. But if you are used to doing a lot of semi-competitive online racing, like maybe the ranked racing in Race Room, or you do a lot of iRacing, or you do AC online a lot, or leagues and things, and you're used to racing against real people, this sort of game, it just doesn't have the compelling nature. The single player just doesn't. You just can't compare racing offline to racing against people. But again, this is the type of game that gets people into sims, and then so they play this and they're like, oh, I quite like racing, and then they ruin their lives, and before you know it, they're buying DD wheels, T-slot sim rigs. But yeah, so my absolute first impressions, obviously champion winning Hamilton there. What's Verstappen doing there? I'm sure I took him off the track. What's he doing there? Should be there. First impressions. Yeah, I mean, on a PC, the whole user interface aspect, no keyboard and no mouse, that's bloody annoying. Bit of an arse to set up. Handling seems passable, I'd describe it, from a sort of snobby sim racing perspective. There's nothing like massively obnoxious. There was no input delay. More force feedback variation than a set of Corsa Competizione. So that's something. But yeah, I think I'm more of a PC multiplayer type person. So, well, we'll see what this is like in multiplayer. But it doesn't immediately grab hold of me and make me go, wow, I definitely want to drive more of this. I've been spoiled too much by simulators. But it also doesn't make me go, oh, this is terrible, throw it in the dustbin. So that's what it is from my jaded, bald head view at this point in time. So, thank you for watching this first impressions of F1 2021. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, click the like button, subscribe. Let me know what you think of it as a jaded sim racer or as just an F1 player. You know, maybe you totally disagree with me. You probably do. Everyone does. But also let me know what you'd like to see me cover if you want my jaded opinion on other aspects of the game. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Happy tea drinking, and goodbye, guys.